Time to finish off our proper Secret Wars review. We've already looked at the event itself, of course, and the months leading up to the heroes leaving for Battleworld. Now it's time to see what happened to them after they returned home. Let's do it, sweetheart. It's important to remember when we look at these comics that the Secret Wars event was still running, so the reasons for the changes to characters was a mystery to the reader. They would have to read the series to find out why their favourite character's costume had changed, or why they were injured. We, of course, look at it now, knowing what happened, being intimately familiar with the series. Speaking of the series, when we looked at the lead up to it, I chose a random order in which to review the comics. However, issue 12 actually tells us the order in which the heroes return home, as, group by group, Reed Richards transported them first to the Beyonders orbiting construct, and then on, back to the sheep meadow in Central Park. The issues we're about to look at partly confirm that order. So where to start? Well, issue 12 tells us that the first group to leave Battleworld consisted of Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, the Hulk, Curt Connors and Magneto. In which case, I guess the place to start is, and let's hope I'm not peeking too soon, The Amazing Spider-Man, issue 252. What can I say? It's an iconic comic with an iconic cover. Known not so much for showing Spider-Man's return from Battleworld, as debuting his new black suit. In terms of the creative team, this issue serves as a transitional one, as the regular writer for the previous couple of years, Roger Stern, passes the baton to Tom DeFalco, who filled that role for the next few years. As a result, we are told that it is plotted by Roger Stern and scripted by Tom DeFalco. The art is provided by long-term Tom DeFalco collaborator Ron Frenz. Straight away, we see the world of Spider-Man being tied tightly into the world of Secret Wars, as we are shown the front page of the Daily Bugle and their report into the missing superheroes. And there are some nice little stories about it on page 2, not just page 2 of the comic, but page 2 of the Daily Bugle. One story is just generally about the heroes going missing, but there's also a story about the fact that crime is rising. And a third story about Mockingbird tells us how she is concerned about her husband's whereabouts. We then get the usual nonsense from Jonah, where he asks, how is Spider-Man wrapped up in all this? Yeah, because it really is his MO, isn't it? And then Robbie mentions the fact that the heroes have been gone for days. We then cut to the sheep meadow, where the Beyonders construct rematerialises, and from it emerges the all-new, all-different, amazing Spider-Man, with Curt Connors. Spidey actually says a couple of interesting things here that are never clarified. First of all, he says, hang on Connors, I think we're going to make it this time. And he also says, when he asks a bystander for a drink, that he and his friend have been travelling a long time. Interesting. Spidey is overjoyed to be back home, and at least one of the police officers present doesn't recognise him. That makes sense. It always grated on me that when Spidey changed his suit in the early-ish 2000s to what was known as the Iron Spider suit, so many baddies and cops instantly recognised him. Despite never seeing him in that outfit before, they knew it was Spider-Man. That really grated. It didn't make sense. We then get our first ever view of Spidey firing webs from the back of his hand. Although you'll note that he doesn't make a fist. That, a kind of fisted approach, was more Venom's thing. And very, very rarely did Spidey do it when he had the alien suit. Okay, so who's next through the Beyonders construct? Is it the Hulk? Magneto? Spider-Woman perhaps? No, none of them. Instead, it's the Avengers. And Iron Man. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. It's at that point that Spidey decides that he and Curt should leave the scene. And as they swing away, Spidey explains that Reed Richards has suggested that none of them speak about what's happened over the last few days during the Secret Wars. And Curt agrees. Why? What's the point? I suppose it makes it easier for the writers of the various comics to get back to their own storylines. And the last few days? If the whole of the 12-issue Secret Wars happened in just a few days, wow, what a busy few days they were. We then get another first as we see the costume respond to Spidey's thoughts as he kind of tucks his keys and wallet into it. After dropping Kurt Connors off to his family, Peter rings Aunt May to reassure her that he's okay, and he tries to call the Black Cat unsuccessfully. She also tries to drop in on him later on in the issue, also unsuccessfully. But they eventually meet up and are reunited in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 90. We then see the alien suit go into overdrive as it responds to Peter's mental commands to change from his Spider-Man outfit into his civilian clothes. When I started reading comics as a kid, it was during the period when Spidey was wearing the alien suit. At the same time that I was reading those comics, I was also reading Marvel Tales Spider-Man, so the older stuff from the 60s. And as much as I enjoyed those, when I read the alien suit Spider-Man comics, and when I saw it do this kind of thing, when I saw it change his outfit at his mental command, it just blew me away. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was a way of making an already cool looking suit even cooler. After that, we see Spidey foil a street robbery, and then the issue finishes with him taking a couple of arguing youngsters on a tour of the city to make them appreciate it more. So all in all, an issue that's pretty light on story, but Spider-Man is back home. Spider-Man would continue to wear the alien suit for a total of 6 months, breaking free of it before he'd even begun to wear it in Secret Wars. In fact, the symbiote storyline meant that Spider-Man felt the after effects of Secret Wars longer than nearly any other character, even more so when you consider what became of the suit. We have a bit of an issue here though. Where were Magneto, the Hulk and Spider-Woman? Surely they should at least have been the next people through the portal, if not actually appearing alongside Spider-Man. Instead, we got the Avengers. Well, we never did see Spider-Woman and Magneto return, probably because they didn't have their own title. The Hulk did though, and issue 295 features his return, as told by regular writer Bill Mantlo and penciler Sal Buscema. The Hulk emerges from the Beyonders construct, with his legs still in a brace, and using the Reed Richards designed, pneumatic crutch, I suppose you'd call it. Of course, readers of this series wouldn't know how the Hulk had sustained that injury, and they'd have to wait an entire year to find out how it happened, because it happened in issue 12 of the series. And I think they'd probably be a bit disappointed when they did eventually see what happened, because it was hardly the most memorable event of the series. When it comes to the time of day that the Hulk has emerged from the Beyonders construct, it's hard to tell. Owing to the fact that there aren't many people around, and the way those couple of people are dressed, and I think the colour scheme that's used in these panels, it suggests that it's the evening, or maybe night time. But it's hard to say definitively. We're told the Hulk is nursing a wound which he only dimly recalls having received. I told you it wasn't memorable, didn't I? Also, the Hulk is rather grumpy here, and that's consistent with what we saw in Secret Wars and also in the preceding issues of the Hulk comic, as he slowly but surely regresses to his more savage state. We then get a recap of the Gamma Cure storyline, and also the fact that his girlfriend, Kate Waynesborough, has been kidnapped by Boomerang. Remembering that, the Hulk continues to where Boomerang is hiding out with Kate, and the pair of them have a rematch. And it is a brutal rematch, which the Hulk really wins. In fact, Boomerang's life is only saved because of the intervention of a couple of police officers and Kate Waynesborough, who asks him why he's being so savage. But that isn't the big question. The big question is, where has he been for the last few days? But she doesn't ask that. In fact, it isn't referred to at all in this issue. Max Hammer has been publicising the Gamma Cure, so that kind of infers that time has passed, but it doesn't explicitly say so. And neither Kate nor Boomerang mention it whatsoever. Has Kate been sitting on that sofa for the last few days? Has Boomerang been waiting for the phone call from Max Hammer for the last few days? He seems quite relaxed about it if he has. So, other than being drawn with that crutch, did the Secret Wars actually change anything for the Hulk? No. I guess the writer or editor, or perhaps both, just weren't on board with it and wanted to get back to their storyline, despite the fact that they had planted little teasers for the Secret Wars for 3 issues before the event started. Bruce and Kate return to his lab, where they discover that Max Power has been treating loads of people with Bruce's untested gamma cure. This upsets Bruce, and we know what that means. And as he and Max are arguing over whether or not he should have treated all these people, they're interrupted by the owner of the dog that was cured in the previous issue, bringing the dog back into the lab. The dog wasn't killed by the gamma treatment, but the gamma treatment did turn the dog savage, and as a result, the owner had to shoot it. Now the same effect takes a hold of Max, and he majorly hulks out. All the other people that have received the gamma treatment face the same fate. Luckily, however, in issue 296, Rom turns up. Yes, I know, he's a fan favourite, and understandably so. He is a pretty cool character. Whilst the Hulk and Max throw down, Rom is able to use his neutralizer on all of the people that have been treated, and that reverts them to their original state. So they are ill once more, but they are no longer green, and they no longer face the prospect of hulking out. He also uses his neutralizer on Max and the Hulk. It cures Max, but it has no effect on the Hulk. It seems the Hulk's body has been irradiated for so long that not even the neutralizer can revert it to its original state. During that savage battle with Max Power, the Hulk's leg brace is shattered, and he happily leaps away without it on the last page. That's it. That was the last influence of the Secret Wars on the Hulk. So we can't nail down exactly when the Hulk returned to Central Park, but we do know that it wasn't between Spider-Man and the Avengers, which it should have been. Actually, he isn't the only one, because the X-Men also should have arrived before the Avengers, but didn't. In fact, they did. And in issue 181 of that title, Chris Claremont and John Romita Jr. explain all. The X-Men and a giant dragon materialise in Japan. But Storm does say that they first appeared in Central Park before a big flash transported them to their current location. Cyclops isn't with them, just as he wasn't with them when they left Earth, and Storm notices that and says, "Where is he?" Well, I can answer that one. We may not have seen Cyclops being taken away from his honeymoon before the Secret Wars, but we certainly do see him being returned to it. He literally lands right beside his new bride, Madeline Pryor, who is furious because, as she says, he's been gone over a week. Over a week? Interesting. Actually, that lapse of time is confirmed by Professor X, because he can see today's date in the minds of the locals. So you remember the bang when the X-Men began to materialise away from Battleworld? I guess that had two effects. One is to send them via New York to Tokyo. The other is to make the little dragon that was friends with Lockheed become massive. And the rest of this issue shows the X-Men dealing with that giant dragon and the destruction that it causes. And the influence of Secret Wars kind of ends there. The giant dragon did return much later in the 2005 limited series Kitty Pryde, Shadow and Flame, but after they deal with it in this issue, the X-Men quickly return home. It's after they return home that we get what must be the most personal and emotional consequence of the Secret Wars. You may remember I said that Jim Shooter was never happy, never comfortable with Kitty Pryde dating Colossus because of Kitty's age, basically. And he was hoping that Secret Wars would give him an opportunity to split them up. Well, in this issue, he gets his wish. Aside from that, it's an awesome issue. There's no beating around the bush from either Chris Claremont or Peter Rasputin. After a few words of small talk, Kitty asks him what happened during the Secret Wars. "Anything interesting happen out there?" she says. To which he replies, "I met someone else. We fell in love." Boom! That's how you dump a girl, eh, Pete? Unfortunately for Kitty, the conversation continues. She asks him, was she pretty? And Pete, being an honest, honourable guy, doesn't hold back. As beautiful as the dawn, as gentle as a spring rain. "All right, Pete, blimey. I tell you what, have you got any photos, maybe, of you and Zaji having sex? I'm sure Kitty would love to see those." Whilst Kitty battles with her emotions in the background, Pete continues, saying he can't believe she's gone. Can someone shut him up? Eventually, Kitty manages to make her excuses and prise herself away from that awful conversation. and she goes back to the mansion. But of course, her roommate is Peter's sister, Illyana. And Illyana says, "How are you? You okay?" And in a few panels, with minimal words, we see exactly how she feels as she finally lets out her emotions. It doesn't take Kitty long to decide that she needs to take some time out to get away from the mansion. So she's going to go and visit her parents. She talks to Storm while she's packing, and she says things like she wishes that Zaji had lived, because then at least she would have someone to compete with. But how can you compete with the ghost? And then Chris Claremont gives us another emotional sucker punch as Kitty, who, let's be honest, we all kind of see as the younger sister that we want to protect. As she says to Storm, "I hate him, Aurora, with all my heart. I love him." Meanwhile, Logan has decided to take Peter out to a bar for a drink and what he says is a long overdue talk. And it's in this little scene and other scenes after this where we really see that all the characters in the X-Men at this point all had their own individual personalities. None of them were interchangeable. Nightcrawler joins them for a tense car ride and an even more tense conversation in the bar. And Logan confides in him that he wants to take a piece out of Peter. Logan spends some time trying to explain to Peter that he is mourning the loss of a fantasy relationship. It wasn't really real, and that Kitty deserves better. And there's a nice little exchange between the two of them where, and bearing in mind here, they've both been drinking alcohol, but of course Peter is the only one that's going to be affected by it, where Peter says, "Are you calling me a coward?" And Logan's reply is quite casual. By then, however, he's picked up on the scent of someone he knows in the bar. Kane Marco, Juggernaut. At this point, Logan actually tries to sneak all three of them out of the bar without Kane noticing. Now, Kane is schmoozing up to a young woman at this point, so it should be possible. However, Peter, in his drunken state, manages to spill his drink all over Kane. And, well, let's just say it kicks off. Logan actually stops Nightcrawler from getting involved, from helping Colossus out, because the way he sees it, that the Juggernaut is now going to do the job that actually he wanted to do. And actually, Colossus and the Juggernaut really go at it. In the end, Colossus loses. However, even the Juggernaut says, "Tell the kid he did himself proud. He's got guts and heart," and he throws a mean right cross. By the time Colossus frees himself from the rubble, the Juggernaut is long gone. And Colossus is cross with Wolverine and Nightcrawler and says, "Why did you leave me to it? Why didn't you help me out? We're supposed to be a team. We're supposed to look out for each other, make sacrifices for each other." That, of course, gives Logan the opportunity to point out that is exactly what Kitty has done for Peter, especially when she agreed to marry Caliban of the Morlocks. And Peter didn't even thank her. As far as Logan's concerned, thanks to the Juggernaut, Peter now feels some of the pain that he has inflicted on Kitty. So, 2 broken hearts and Juggernaut failed to pull. Are you proud of yourself, Shooter? As we know, The Amazing Spider-Man issue 252 showed us not the X-Men, but the Avengers following Spider-Man back to Earth. So, let's take a proper look at that, with issue 243 brought to us by the usual team of Roger Stern and Al Milgrom. This is a decent issue, fully buying into Secret Wars by devoting half of the issue to those members of the Avengers that were left behind. In the X-Men, we saw that it had been over a week that the heroes had been missing, although Spider-Man said that it had been a few days. Here, in the Avengers, the Vision is holding a press conference at Avengers Mansion, where he mentions speculation about the missing superheroes over the past several days. The Vision wants to reassure the public that despite the absence of so many heroes, the Avengers are still there, still looking after the general public. And they are. The Avengers don't usually get involved in foiling bank robberies, but that's exactly what Star Fox does, with bank robbers who find themselves massively out of their depth. He even uses his emotion manipulating powers. The Scarlet Witch helps out the fire department by sucking all of the oxygen away from a blazing building. Whilst at Avengers Mansion, we see that Mockingbird is staying there, and we are told that Susan Richards and Alicia Masters are also there. Star Fox, the Scarlet Witch and Mockingbird all see lights in the sky above Central Park, and they rush there in time to see the returning Avengers. And Iron Man is very quick to leave the scene, and after the Scarlet Witch arrives in a car, I'm sure she can fly. Captain America suggests that they all keep quiet about what happened on Battleworld. He says that it's best that the public don't know about the secret war, but he doesn't explain why. And surely the entire country, no, the entire world, must be at least a little bit curious about what happened to that massive chunk of Denver that went missing for however long that lasted. One of the officers there says that other police checkpoints have reported super guys popping up too. A patrol across the park reported a green lady appearing with Mr. Fantastic and the Human Torch. We'll get to that in a bit. However, this is an interesting little detail because it may explain away some of the things that have seemed to be inconsistencies. For example, the Hulk. Because it could be that they are all emerging at pretty much the same time, from the same construct, but perhaps because it's so large, from different exits. Later that day, there's an official team debriefing, which everyone attends, including She-Hulk in her new Fantastic Four leotard. At that debriefing, two things happen. Firstly, the Wasp hands over the chairmanship of the Avengers to the Vision. And secondly, the Vision proposes, because there are too many Avengers at the moment, they are supposed to be limited to a roster of 6 at this present time. The Vision suggests creating a new team on the west coast of America. I wonder what they'll call them. Captain America and Thor returned with the rest of the team, of course. But how did their solo titles handle things? Well, prepare to be underwhelmed, beginning with Captain America, issue 293, by J.M. DeMatteis and Paul Neary. We spend the early parts of this issue with a couple of Cap's enemies, Baron Zemo and Mother Superior. When we do eventually catch up with Cap, he is actually in Virginia, meeting an old friend of his. Yes, this is after he's returned from the Secret Wars. Not that you'd know it. There's no mention of it at all when he's talking to this chap. Instead, they talk about Sharon Carter and reminisce about other old times. Once that trip's over, he heads back to New York, where he joins up with his kind of current sidekick, Jack Monroe, aka Nomad. Nomad outright asks him about the Secret Wars. But as we know by now, Cap wants to keep stum over the whole affair, and he says he doesn't want to talk about it. Well, we do. And you'd have thought he would have told Nomad, one of his oldest friends, about what happened. And he clearly has mentioned it to him. Otherwise, how does Nomad know to ask about it in the first place? But no, that's it. It's not going to be discussed. Instead, Cap talks about the proposal he got from his girlfriend in the previous issue. And Secret Wars isn't mentioned again. That's even less consideration than the Hulk gave it. Blimey. Some of these writers really weren't into Secret Wars, were they? I'll say, especially when you look at how Walt Simonson handled it in Thor. You may recall from part 1 that Thor left for the Secret Wars in his March issue, albeit via some secret panels that wouldn't be revealed until the following month. Well, not only did he leave for Battleworld in that issue, but he also returned. He leaves on page 2, and by page 5 we are told it is a couple of weeks later. And there he is, visiting Nick Fury. Even less time is spent referencing his time away than in Captain America, as all that is said is that Nick Fury remarks, "Glad to see you made it back in one piece." Even then, I'm just assuming the Colonel is referring to Secret Wars. It may have been that Thor just popped out to get some milk and was gone longer than expected. Whilst every other comic cover dated April dealt with the heroes leaving, and those dated May showed them returning, Thor had already moved on, getting all of that fuss out of the way with just 4 panels in March. That said, the title did try to make amends a few years later, when Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz brought us An Untold Tale of the Secret Wars in issue 383. Well, that's what it says in the corner box anyway, and any comic with a corner box is fine by me. In issue 3 of Secret Wars, Thor and the Enchantress took leave of everybody else to speak about godly things. That alone time was interrupted in issue 4, when the mountain range was dropped on the other heroes, leaving Thor to battle all of the villains solo. This issue calls back to that time with a story that couldn't be told until now. Whoa, this is going to be epic. We're told this story courtesy of the Enchantress, who is recounting it to her sister Lorelei. We have a quick recap of the very beginning of the Secret War before we then catch up with Thor and the Enchantress having their godly talk. Now, we only really saw a bit of this in the Secret War series before it all kicked off with the villains. Now, this comic gives us the chance to see what else happened. She is hoping that Thor is interested in her as a woman. But after he says that this could be her opportunity to redeem herself, she gets angry and says, the only reason you brought me here was because you're going to try to recruit me to your cause. In anger, she animates some trees and gets them to attack Thor. Actually, the Enchantress isn't as angry as she's making out. This is just a distraction, so that whilst Thor is dealing with these tree monsters, she invests all of her power into her lips. So if she can just get him to kiss her on the lips, he will be her slave forever. Unfortunately, just as she's finishing up these preparations, she is interrupted. Some bizarre monster emerges from the nearby lake and attacks her, so she calls out to Thor for help. Of course, Thor deals with the beast, and the Enchantress, in gratitude, says, "Come and claim your reward." She tries to tempt him, to seduce him, but he resists in the strongest way, insisting that he must remain virtuous. Does that mean what I think it means? Is Thor a... No, he can't be. Anyway, there's a bit more chit-chat between the two before the story then runs parallel with what we saw in issue 4 of Secret Wars. We see that tender moment where they almost kiss, and we know what comes next. They are disturbed by the tremors from the mountain range being dropped on the heroes, and Enchantress transports them to the heroes' HQ to find it in ruins and occupied by the villains. She turns away and Thor fights alone. Now, she actually gets some of the details wrong here, because she has it that it looks like the Wrecker says, "Enough talk, let's ace the sucker," whereas it was actually the Absorbing Man. Now, I don't know what to make of this sequence, because it was a great fight and it's great reliving it. But if I want to relive it, I can read Secret Wars. That said, they have clearly paid a lot of attention to the original fight scene, because a lot of these moments are pretty much identical to the original comic, but seen from a different angle. Probably the best example of this is when he hits Titania. She, he, Kang and Dr. Octopus are all in the correct positions, the same as in Secret Wars, but like I said, it's from the reverse angle of the original picture. We see the Enchantress's thoughts. Now, she was kind of forgotten about in the original fight, but here we see that she actually wants to help Thor, but she's too scared. We get a few extra details here as the Wrecking Crew singularly attack Thor. Nothing to worry about there. Before the inevitable happens and Ultron seems to destroy him. Now, originally we saw that the Enchantress was upset at this point, but here she outright challenges Doom over what's happened, before she then thinks twice and backs down. And the reason she's telling Lorelei all this, the moral of the story, it seems to be that Lorelei shouldn't take love for granted, and she should grasp it when she has the chance, much like presumably the Enchantress feels that she should have done with Thor. Okay. Well, it's always good to revisit Secret Wars. Thank God for YouTube. And we did get some extra bits in this, especially that clever little touch about her lips being enchanted. So now that kind of changes the context of that original moment between her and Thor. But was it really a story that couldn't be told until now? I can't see why. It's tempting to say that the lack of buy-in on Thor and Captain America was down to the editor of both comics, especially when we see that the editor of both books was the same guy, Mark Gruenwald. However, he was also the editor of the Avengers, and another comic that did show consequences from Secret Wars, albeit temporarily, and that comic is Iron Man. Bearing in mind there is no action at all on the cover of issue 182, I still think it's great. What a stark message graffitied onto those walls. The team here is Denny O'Neil writing, with art from Luke McDonnell. This is another issue where half of it, just over actually, is devoted to those that were left behind. In this case, it's Tony Stark, because if you remember, it was James Rhodes that was wearing the Iron Man armour during Secret Wars. Despite a massive snowstorm hitting New York, Tony Stark is out walking the streets, searching for his current love interest, Gretel, who is a fellow alcoholic and is expecting to give birth any day now. We really do see how much Tony is in the grip of drink in this issue, as he sells his coat in a pawn shop for $10, and the pawnbroker says, "I'll give you $10 and some advice. Use the $10 to get yourself a room and get out of this weather, because it's awful out there." Tony, however, eschews the room and decides to spend the $10 on booze. It's as he's sitting in the snow drinking that booze that Gretel actually finds him. This is a desperate Tony Stark we see in this issue. All he can think about is the end of his life and the fact that alcohol is the only thing that helps numb the pain he's been feeling for some time now. He's snapped out of his thoughts by the coming of new life into the world and the passing of old, as Gretel gives birth but dies shortly after. And Tony is left with her and the baby in the storm. When Iron Man does arrive back on Earth, of course it is in the company of the Avengers, and he is wearing his armour that has been modified by Reed Richards back on Battleworld. As soon as he takes his leave of the team, he tests the armour to see if it still works properly back on Earth, and he gets a spectacular answer. So the armour kind of works, but he can't control it. He asks his friend Morley Irwin his opinion as to what could be wrong with it. And Morley says that because the technology that's been used in the modifications is alien in nature and actually has been working on an alien planet, the problem, it could be anything. It's while he's with Morley that he hears that the police have found Tony on the street and he is now lying unconscious in a hospital bed. It's whilst Rhodey is visiting him that Tony comes to. Something has happened, has changed within him, and a realisation has dawned on him. Whilst he was holding that tiny baby, he realised how precious life was. All life, including his own, and he vows to stop killing himself with drink. Man, we've got to do that storyline someday. As for Iron Man's armour, that story continues in issue 183, where he and Morley run further tests on it. They only serve to confirm what we already know, which is that the suit is unstable, uncontrollable. Rhodey knows that if he can't control the suit, then he can't be Iron Man. So he decides there and then to dump the extra technology in a nearby bank of snow. That includes his gloves. So for the time being, he's going to have to do without those and repulsor rays. Otherwise, he's back in control of the suit's other functions. The rest of the issue sees him battling a nigh indestructible android called Taurus. But as with the Hulk, once Iron Man has ditched that alien technology, the influence of the Secret Wars is over. That's not to say that the story of the alien armour is over, because Mark Gruenwald, editor of Iron Man and walking encyclopedia of the Marvel Universe, found himself 6 years later as the writer of Quasar of all characters. And in issue 8, he gave us what was promised to be absolutely the last Secret Wars tie-in. I suppose that depends on how you define tie-in. Anyway, I'm sold. So let's see what Mark and penciler Mike Manley had in store for us. At this time in his history, Quasar acted as a kind of immigration officer for planet Earth, tracking down literal illegal aliens. And at the moment, he's in the course of tracking down 11 energy signatures of these kind of creatures. One of the signatures he's tracing leads him to a place he knows very well, Project Pegasus. He used to be the security chief there, but he hasn't been back there since it all kicked off with the Serpent Crown back in Marvel Team Up Annual number 5, and he ended up resigning. On this occasion, he finds the place in utter darkness, with the doors open and unguarded. He learns that the whole place has been evacuated, although he doesn't know the reason why. After searching several levels of the complex, he finds the power generators, and it looks like they have been eaten away at by some kind of acid. He soon discovers the cause of this damage. It is a metallic-like alien that eats very much like a fly, by half dissolving things in acid and then sucking up what's left. Quasar and his replacement as Chief of Security, a chap called Blue Shield, battle the alien lifeform, but it proves to be seemingly indestructible. Quasar discovers that this alien lifeform is actually Iron Man's discarded alien armour. Once he had disposed of it in the snow, it found its way to Project Pegasus, where it's been hiding out and evolving ever since. Quasar finds a thing called the Magma Tap. This was a hole that was drilled by Project Pegasus's scientists down into the molten lava layer of the Earth itself. As soon as he manages to manoeuvre the alien into the hole and then pushes him down much further into it, the lava dissolves the alien. And in so doing, Iron Man's Secret Wars armour is no more. By my reckoning, we have only one group of heroes left to follow home, the Fantastic Four, or the Fantastic Three as they were during the Secret Wars. Susan Richards stayed at home due to her pregnancy. That meant that only 3 of the team left for Battleworld and 3 returned, but not the same 3. The strange thing about issue 265 of the Fantastic Four is that of all the post-Secret Wars comics, this is the only one that was cover dated April. That means it came out before issue 1 of Secret Wars. This issue was released at the height of the John Byrne era. That means he wrote it, did pencils, inks, the lot. So let's have a look and find out who the new member of the team is. Yeah, I know we all know who it is. Just play along. This issue is split into 2 separate stories. The first one, The House That Reed Built, details the efforts by the Trapster, or Paste Pot Pete if you prefer, to break into the Baxter building. He's largely successful, due mainly to the fact that the Fantastic Four are absent, but he is ultimately defeated by their robot secretary, Roberta. But it's the second part that we're really here for, and that is called Home Are the Heroes. We catch up with Susan Richards, who is currently residing at the Avengers mansion, and she gives us her side of what happened when the rest of the Fantastic Four were abducted by the Beyonder. She saw the light created by the arrival of the Beyonder's construct, as too, strangely, did Alicia Masters, Ben Grimm's blind girlfriend. We see that Sue actually took Alicia in a Fantastic car to Central Park to investigate. She also felt that urge to enter the construct that other heroes had felt, but she resisted it. And before she had a chance to land, the construct disappeared. When she did arrive, she saw the remaining Avengers. They explained to her what happened, and she and Alicia decided to stay with them at Avengers Mansion so they could be closer to the sheep meadow. And how long ago did all of that happen? A week or so ago. I think we're going to have to go with the over a week or several days that most of these comics have said that the events of Secret Wars happened over. I think Spider-Man, when he said a few days, he must have meant it in the loosest possible way. As Susan, Alicia and Franklin are walking in the grounds of the Avengers Mansion, they bump into Mockingbird, who asks if Vision has made his speech to the press yet. 10 out of 10 for continuity. Then, as night falls, she once again sees the light that heralded the arrival of the Beyonder's construct. As night falls. So it was the night time when the Hulk arrived. And everyone else, I suppose. She runs to the sheep meadow in her invisible form. And in doing so, she sees Iron Man flying away from the scene. She, but not we, sees Spider-Man, the Hulk, and even the X-Men. This really is some great continuity, tying in all of the various strands from the different titles together. The only noticeable absence is the Beyonder's construct. It doesn't seem to be there at all. Instead, these heroes are just arriving in a blaze of energy. Speaking of which, as she stands and watches, 3 new forms appear. It's the Human Torch, Mr. Fantastic, and the team's latest member, She-Hulk. Reed and Sue understandably are overjoyed to see each other. And when he notices that she hasn't yet had the baby, he comments, "We must not have been gone as long as it seemed." As long as it seemed? Tell Spider-Man that. Then Alicia asks Johnny, "Is Ben here?" Awkward. Good old Fantastic Four. We learned so much from them. So the Secret Wars lasted over a week by Earth time, but it felt longer on Battleworld. Yeah, that sounds about right for everything that happened there. And now everybody is back home. Oh no, loose end! Where is Ben Grimm? It's hard to argue that anyone, even Spider-Man, felt the after effects of Secret Wars more than the Thing. After Battleworld made him change from the Thing to Ben Grimm and back again on more than one occasion, he decided to stay behind when everybody else headed home. His adventures on Battleworld continued in his own comic for the next year, beginning with issue 11. That man John Byrne is on writing duties again, and the pencils were provided by the guy that drew nearly the entire series, Ron Wilson. In issue 12 of Secret Wars, the Thing told us that he wanted to stay behind on Battleworld because he had some things to figure out. And in what must be the tightest bit of continuity ever, the very last panel of issue 12 of Secret Wars is mirrored in the first panel of this issue, as we see Ben Grimm beginning his journey to figure things out. He can now change from Ben Grimm to the Thing literally at will. And we are told that he's been on the planet a few weeks. Actually, he reiterates that later on in this same issue, although he does also say that time flows differently on this planet. So okay, maybe he has been on the planet for a few weeks, but that's not the same as being missing from Earth for a few weeks. Other than that, this whole issue really is a bit of a one and done. After he chases some aliens that snatch Reed's teleporting device away from him. What it does do, as Ben is travelling across the landscape, is it shows the patchwork nature of the planet, as the landscapes suddenly change from one type of environment to another totally alien type of environment. Of course, he does get the teleporter back, not that he's leaving the planet anytime soon. Oh, and the title, by the way, Rocky Grimm Space Ranger, that's taken from a 1954 science fiction TV series called Rocky Jones Space Ranger. No, I'd never heard of it either. Ben Grimm stays on the planet and has various adventures over the next several issues, or if you're Spider-Man, the next few issues, until we get to issue number 22, where things suddenly turn very different. And I'm not just talking about his beard and ponytail. We begin with a bit of a dream sequence, with Ben returning home to Alicia Masters. Yeah, remember her, do you, Ben? But it seems she isn't interested in the man, Ben Grimm. She only loves the Thing. Then it turns out he's not at home at all, but in some kind of arena with himself. This Ben Grimm explains to the Thing that actually the Thing has always been able to change back into his human form. But he was so scared that Alicia Masters only loved him for being the Thing that he put a kind of psychological block on it, and that has stopped him from reverting to his human form. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering where this Ben Grimm has come from, the planet Battleworld created him. And now he wants to take the Thing's place back on Earth. The new Ben Grimm, during his wanderings, found the skull of Ultron, who was destroyed in issue 12 of Secret Wars by the Wasp. Ultron is now reanimated and is leading a vast army that first is going to conquer Battleworld and then move on to Earth. Ben Grimm then attacks the Thing, and the Thing knows that he has to destroy Ben Grimm if he has any hope of surviving. But he also knows that in doing that, he will take away his ability to ever revert back to his human form. I guess the Thing knows a metaphor when he sees one. The Thing has a new love interest on this planet, and her name is Tariana, and she now sneaks up on the new Ben Grimm and stabs him in the back. As soon as she does this, the arena begins to crumble and then fade from existence, as does the new Ben Grimm, and Ultron and Ultron's army, and Tariana herself, although she lingers around a bit longer than the others. Whilst the Thing holds Tariana in his arms, he confirms the theory that was put forward earlier on in this issue, which is that he has always been able to revert back to his human form, but he stops himself from doing so out of fear of losing Alicia. In fact, he talks about Alicia quite a lot at this point. Yeah, like your dying girlfriend really wants to hear that. Finally, she fades away. Now we are told that pretty much everything that the Thing has encountered on Battleworld was created by the other Ben Grimm. He, though, the Thing, created Tariana out of his own thoughts. As such, she couldn't do anything that he didn't want her to do. So when she stabbed Ben Grimm in the back and killed him, that was really what the Thing wanted to do. In doing so, he has now turned his back on his human half and has finally come to terms. Whilst wandering after that, the Thing comes across Ultron's head, picks it up, and finally presses the button on Reed's device. With the Thing now gone from Battleworld, the whole planet begins to crumble in on itself and eventually fall apart. Gosh, I feel like I should make a speech. Maybe I could. When I think of all the things we've been through during the Secret Wars, it occurs to me... I guess that's it then. All the heroes are back home and Battleworld itself has disintegrated. This issue came out in the same month as the very last issue of Secret Wars. And it's odd to think that the immediate effects of an event that touched the titles of every character that was included in it were actually all over by the time the series finished. Here was an event that was intended to have consequences on the wider Marvel Universe. But the Hulk's injury, Iron Man's armour, even Spider-Man's alien suit were already nothing more than memories. Of course, we hadn't seen the last of the alien costume, not that anybody knew that at the time, and She-Hulk would remain on the Fantastic Four's roster for some time yet. But other than that, the Beyonders' legacy was at an end. However, it wasn't just comic book readers that loved the series, creators did too, and over the years they have mined it again and again to produce spin-offs, what-ifs and other related follow-ups. Whilst the original series was still flying off the shelves, Jim Shooter was already working on an arguably even more ambitious sequel. And when the biggest event ever in the history of Marvel Comics was planned for 2015, an event that would trigger a reboot of every title and heralded the end of the Ultimate Universe, it was initiated by the power of the Beyonders and proudly bore the title Secret Wars.